Bueno, siendo las 4:05 de la tarde,
It's
hora
4:05 in summertime in Europe. We're gonna start this webinar. Welcome everyone. My name is Nicolás Patrici. I lead a couple of strategic projects at Obreal Global, which is an association made up of the associations of universities and research centers with members in Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean, Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, especially India. It's an honor for us to offer this webinar about the future of the internationalization and perspectives from the North and the South. Before we begin and presenting the colleagues who will be part of this webinar, I would like to make a couple of clarifications. This webinar is being recorded, so if anyone has a problem with that, with your names showing up on screen, please let us know by email and we will delete any references, so that you can protect your policies with regards to privacy. Then we will have interpreting into English, Spanish, and Portuguese. So if you want to follow the webinar in one of these languages, you just have to activate the interpretation icon you will see on the lower bar of the webinar. This webinar will consist of 3 or almost 4 blocks. Our speakers will have the possibility to speak, and then afterwards, in the end, the final block, you will be able to ask your questions or make comments. Please, for that, use the icon for questions and answers, which is also on the lower bar, and then we will get your questions. Should anyone want to speak live, please raise your hands in the end if we have time, and if we may give you the floor in that case. Today we have, sorry, my daughter, I apologize, these things happen. Honey, I can't do it now. I'm so sorry, that's cute, honey. She's wearing a hat and she wants me to look at it. For this webinar, we have Eva Hauch. I hope I pronounced it correctly. She'll be representing the European Association for the Internationalization of Education. Their acronym is even harder than her last name. That's why I'm not saying it. And Eva is an expert from the University of Applied Sciences of the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. We also have Marcio Barbosa. He is the director for international relations of the University of Rio Grande do Norte in Brazil, and he is the new president or chair of FAUBAI Brazil. So welcome, Marcio, and congratulations. And finally, Nicolás Justa. He is an expert in internationalization from the South African Association of Southern Africa of Universities. He's the co-chair of the African chapter of Obreal. He's a great friend. And finally, sorry, there was someone else, Vidia Yarabdekar, whose last name is almost as difficult for me as Eva's, so I just call her Vidia or Dr. Vidia. Vidia, she is the chair of the Indian chapter of Obreal Global. She's the pro-chancellor or vice president, I don't know the translation into Spanish, but Symbiosis International University in India. She is also one of the people who are part of the debate on the implementation of the new educational act in India, because she is the chair of the higher education chapter of the business chamber of India. So this chamber in India, in India, universities gather at the Chamber of Industries and Trade, which might sound odd for our colleagues in Latin America, but that's where the universities gather in India. So now that I've introduced everyone, please allow me to present this webinar. This webinar is part of the South American chapter's work. For the past 7 months, has been devoting the first 6 months of the year 2021 to trying to better understand the trends about internationalization of curricula and digitalization in South America and Mexico. In order to do that, the South American chapter started to gather data, trying to generate some empirical studies about trends of internationalization. All of this was presented from an interregional perspective on June 2nd on a webinar in which we had Ascun from Colombia, from LDNet from Argentina. We also had the Council of Universities of Central America, the Ministry of Education of Jamaica, and the European Association of Universities. This was the first webinar we held on the trends of internationalization. And now the second one in this series is about the future of internationalization, with a logic of trying to think of internationalization from the perspectives of the South and the North, and the challenges of internationalization from the South and the North. The first introductory element, or the first objective of this webinar, is to offer a series of perspectives about the challenges presented by internationalization when it's debated from an interregional perspective. That's why it's important to have such diverse regions here as India, South America, Europe, and Africa. And before discussing the tools to move forward in this internationalization and how to apply them, for example, the curriculum, the first thing we see is some sort of ignorance about other regions. I'm going to share a survey, a couple of questions just to break the ice. But first of all, I would like to share with you a document. I don't know if you can see it on these pictures. This is a study carried out by Oral Global and Sarua and the Association of Universities of Southeast Asia 10 years ago about cooperation on doctoral education. The project was called CODOC. And one of the results of the project was a study about agreements for cooperation or trends in cooperation from that moment. I'm talking about 2012, almost 10 years ago. And here you can see, as the result was showing, that the ties, the cooperation ties, came from the south to the north, south-north. There were, except in the case of Africa and Brazil, there weren't transversal agreements. We have the feeling that these data, which are old data, because they are 10 years from 10 years ago, we think that they are still relevant and that they can still be replicated today. And the best way to break that logic is to use this post-pandemic or pre-post-pandemic moment, where in the past year and a half, we have been reflecting on how to move on with internationalization without thinking of mobility, because separating those two now seems correct. Of course, this won't change overnight. And of course, offering spaces for this interregional dimension to really happen, we need to create the continents so as to discuss the content afterwards. And it's very difficult to discuss this. There is a global dimension of internationalization that looks at it from a global perspective that many a time does not take into account the specific contexts of national or regional perspectives of internationalization. But it would seem that there isn't really an interregional space for the debate. And that's what this webinar would like to attempt. We would like to offer these first encounters so that meetings that have so much more in common than what one might think, we want these regions to get to know each other so that the public will get to know about the realities and the challenges of internationalization in India, in Africa, in Latin America, and in Europe as well. So before we begin, we prepared 3 questions. I'm going to ask them now to try and see the perspectives or perceptions of our audience. I don't know if you are seeing them. Are you seeing the questions? If you're not, no, you're not. Okay, I'm gonna have to start the voting then. You are seeing them now, right? The first question, please vote, has to do with whether you feel that your institutions follow an internationalization strategy based on one of these elements: institutional needs, regional priorities, global trends, a combination of factors, or that it does not follow any structured strategy. No internationalization strategy. The second question has to do with whether your institution is implementing any of the following actions to support internationalization. Promote internationalization of the curricula among teaching staff or research staff, promote collaborative online international learning, and promote mobility. The third question is where your institution cooperates internationally with: Asia, Europe, the Americas, including the Caribbean, and Mexico, Africa, US and Canada, UK, or Australia and New Zealand. Of course, this question will be biased depending on our participants. Many of them will be from South America. This is being held by the South American chapter, so there is bias towards the Americas, but let's give you another 15 seconds to answer. I see that you are still answering, and this will serve as an introduction and will help us validate or not the data that I was presenting and that we worked on 10 years ago. Okay, then let's finish. Share results. You're seeing them now? It's quite interesting. The first question, most of you answered that there's a combination of factors. We don't know about each factor, but if one had to organize this, we would say that the institutional needs seem to be a priority when defining the strategy. And it's interesting that 28% of the people think that there is no structured internationalization strategy, which does not surprise me, I must admit. Another interesting thing is that we continue to see the promotion of mobility as a determining factor in the internationalization strategy, but it is also true that the promotion of internationalization strategy on the staff and the promotion of collaborative learning are also important elements. But here, and this is the most important piece of data, I'm going to assume that most of the participants are from South America, not all of them, but most of them, according to our records. And we see that the region of the Americas is the priority, or a region they cooperate a lot with. We see Europe. We don't see much of Asia or Africa, which means that the data that I presented continue to be, please, I'm not trying to do science here, but we can see a trend here, and we see that the data, that they are still relevant. So the challenge, it's a huge challenge to try to understand the main challenges of internationalization in the different regions here with us, and that are part of Overall Global. As this person needs to leave in an hour, we're gonna allow her to be the first speaker. So Eva was the first one, but if that's okay, Eva, we're gonna ask Vidia to tell us. India is implementing a new policy of education at a national level, and internationalization has a big role there towards India for the Indian institutions, because all of the validation systems in India will be incorporating internationalization. So this is relevant for the management of the universities in India, and also because it's a national strategy for internationalization. So Vidia, would you be so kind as to tell us your general strategy and how that strategy is being implemented, and how you see from your university and your region in India the need to foster internationalization processes that take into account dimensions as the ones we've been discussing in interregionality. I think that would be a good first step to start this dialogue amongst these regions.
So thank you, Nicholas, for inviting me for this wonderful webinar on future of internationalization. And I think it's very, very relevant in today's times, especially during the pandemic times or post-pandemic times, because internationalization has seen a huge change from what it was maybe 10, 20 years ago to what it is today and what it is going to be in the future. I saw the poll results, and I wasn't really very surprised to see that if the participants, and I think you said majority of the participants are from South America, and a few of them could be from Europe and few from India, but you hardly see any collaborations between the South-South. You see all the collaborations between South and North, and that is exactly what has been happening. Anyways, coming to India as a country, we're very happy that after 34 years, we had the new national education policy that was declared in July of last year, July of 2020. And I'm very happy that as a proponent of internationalization of higher education here in India, I'm personally very happy that internationalization is one big chapter in the national education policy. In the last national education policy, which was 34 years ago, there was no mention of internationalization, which also means that India is now looking at more and more universities to internationalize. India is one of the second largest higher education systems in the world. And with over 38 million students and a large number of faculty members, there are 993 universities presently, and about 50,000 colleges, which are the undergraduate colleges. You will see very few of these universities and colleges actually internationalized. And when I say internationalized, it means those that have foreign students, those that concentrate on mobility, those that have internationalization or those that have internationalized their curricula, and who practice internationalization. So there are a handful of about 20 universities in a research that was done by the Association of Indian Universities recently, that there are about 20 universities that really are kind of internationalized. Now, the definition of internationalization has also changed. Initially, internationalization was like a byproduct of globalization. And presently, internationalization, as I said, would be a byproduct of this pandemic and the things that we have been forced to do because of the pandemic. So initially, internationalization was more about mobility. And in the Indian context, it was a very skewed population of just about 47,000 foreign students that came to India against about 10 lakh Indian students that went abroad for higher education. So leave alone the economics that I don't want to go into, but look at the number of foreign students who came to India were very, very low, or I would say are very, very low. Now we tried to enhance this through various efforts by the Indian government as well as individual universities, but we didn't see much of response. And now with the pandemic, when the mobility is curbed, I do not think Indian universities can really rely on mobility as a factor of internationalization. And therefore, when we say that world over, there are just 2% or there were just 2% students mobile, what happens to those 98% students that remain on the university campuses? And with the pandemic now, 100% of the students that remain on the university campuses, how do we internationalize the campuses? And that is when we can discuss internationalization at home. So what do we do to internationalize our curricula, to bring in foreign faculty, to have our faculty teach in foreign universities, and so on and so forth. I'm sure Eva will cover this more, how to internationalize the curricula. But if you of technology we use, and a lot of university of foreign. And I would say no. But now, out of the 74, more than 50% of these collaborations have become so active that more than 50% of the universities allow their faculty to teach in online courses at our university. And not many symbiosis teachers actually taught in our in foreign universities, but now we see many of our teachers teaching in universities in Europe and other places. So I think that has become that has been a great positive change because of the pandemic. So this is the future of internationalization, where you see more and more faculty actually teaching in foreign classrooms. The second is collaborative online international learning. And let me give you an example of the Symbiosis School of Liberal Arts. Now, the Symbiosis School of Liberal Arts had a very strong collaboration with DePaul University in US. But this collaboration was limited to a few faculty members from our university or our School of Liberal Arts traveling to US every year and teaching in a classroom there. And maybe 2 or 3 of their faculty actually came to India to teach in our liberal arts classroom. But today, the picture is so different. We have virtual classrooms where students from DePaul and Symbiosis School of Liberal Arts actually sit together in the same class virtually, being taught by a teacher from DePaul and a teacher from Symbiosis, co-teaching and co-creating courses. Now, this was never ever seen before, and this is the kind of transformation that has happened, on the collaboration front. But I would now like to concentrate more on inter-regional collaborations that are going to happen. Now networks have started becoming more and more vibrant. Earlier on, like EAIE, there are several such networks, in America, in Europe, in Asia, but were they as active as what they are active now? Even Obrial Global, of course, a very, very active network under the leadership of Professor Raman and Nicholas, has been doing exceedingly well and I've been seeing what they've been doing for the last at least 3 to 4 years. They are an active network, but the kind of collaborations that they have brought, and the collaborations not of universities, but really regions. As Nicholas mentioned, 10 years ago, his data showed that not many South-South collaboration happened. Collaborations only happened between the regions of the South and the regions of the North, more specifically Europe or the US. And now, because of Obrial Global, we see South-South-North collaborations. India never ever spoke to Latin America, but now see, we are in a dialogue right here today, and we find several opportunities where we can actually connect with, through FAUBI, of course, with Latin American universities, which I don't think Indian universities ever even dreamt of. Likewise, Indian universities never had their presence or collaborations with any African universities or South African universities. But again, Obrial Global has brought us, all of us together to develop collaborations between South Africa and India. Now, never ever anything like this happened. What I'm now trying to concentrate through the Obrial Global India chapter, which Nicholas and Raman has given me this responsibility, is to now develop East-East collaborations. How many of us as Indian universities really collaborate with our neighborhood, with universities in Malaysia and Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, or even South Asia with Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia? And can we connect this South Asia to Latin America, to Africa, and then of course to the North? So this is our endeavor to develop such inter-regional collaborations, because finally these are the collaborations that are going to help build bridges between institutions, between universities, between faculty members, and more importantly, between students. And who knows, innovations can happen through these collaborations and these very strong networks. And I see so much of joint research that has been happening on our university with foreign faculty, because India is like a laboratory with so many problems, with so many issues that are around us, that a lot of foreign faculty, especially from the Europe and US, find this as a laboratory to collaborate with our faculty and find, new solutions to these problems. And I'm sure so is the case with Latin America, and so would be the case with Africa. And therefore, I think these interregional collaborations will bring people together, will bring institutions together, and will bring regions together, so as to not just develop bridges between universities, but I'm sure even bridges between policymakers at the level of ministries and various associations of universities. So Nicholas, thank you very much for giving me this time, and I will remain here for the next couple, of course, about an hour, and I'll be more than happy to listen to others and also answer questions, if any. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Vivian, por los comentarios.
Thank you, Vidya, for your comments and for the efforts that you are making in the framework of Obrial Global, and also to show us the situation of India and to make India a so important actor in the area of higher education at a global level. Effectively, it is true that it's been very difficult to connect in the past universities of Latin America with Indian universities or with African universities. And it is also true that we are making efforts to change that. What I would like to do now is, apart from the challenges that we were talking about, Vidya, we would like to talk about the vision of the South and to see the vision of the North, and to ask Eva what she thinks, taking into consideration her role in the Amsterdam University and in the EIA, regarding the challenges that Europe faces as a region, internally and also externally in the foreign area. Eva has two advantages. She is from the Netherlands, so she is, and we know that the Netherlands has been a leader in this internationalization processes. And also the IEA is an organization of individuals, and this is a challenge because I have been working with the EIA for several years, and they don't have at statements at the level of Europe regarding the strategy. So probably they face a lot of challenges. So they need to understand the different challenges of the different institutions in which the individuals that work for the association are. So you are, for example, you have the experience of the Netherlands University, the Amsterdam University, and also you have the experience of the EIA, and you see what you are doing internally or domestically and externally, because there is a general opinion that Europe tends to be a priority and is not longer just a relevant actor as it was in the past. So Eva, you have 10 minutes for this.
Thank you so much, Nicolas. Yeah, so I wanted to start actually with the European Commission 2025 vision for education, because they have some interesting keywords there that I think indicate some of the challenges, but also opportunities that we're looking at. The first one is inclusion and gender, to include or to make education more inclusive for underrepresented groups. Also green and digital, so to connect more with sustainable development, but also to consider how internationalization can be greener and can be more digital. And if any of you know me, I am a strong COIL advocate, so obviously I'm thrilled about that. But also quality of education, and so mastering transversal skills, language learning, closer collaboration between higher institutions of higher education, something we see translated, for example, in initiatives to create European universities, but also joint degrees. So stronger collaboration between institutions within Europe. And we're seeing an increased need for education to prepare students for some of these challenges. And these challenges can be national, regional, and of course global, as we're seeing, but I wanted to focus on some of those more regional and slightly global challenges. The rise in populism, of course, is very worrisome. That results in anti-European feelings. Brexit was a result of one of those, is one practical result of that, and the consequences that that has also for internationalization and collaboration with the UK. A ban on immigration, attacks on academic freedom, anti-globalist sentiments. So what we're seeing as a result of that is that there's a change in patterns of mobility, but there's also a change where there's a stronger call for a different type of, or a more inclusive type of internationalization. So first of all, a call for more comprehensive internationalization, where we look at all different aspects of education. So not just mobility, but internationalization as part of research, as part of our curriculum design, as part of quality assurance, as our partnerships, the reputation of our school. And this, of course, if we start to look at internationalization and how we as a university or as an organization like the EAIE connect to internationalization, then we start to involve many more stakeholders than just the traditional ones connected to mobility. We're also seeing more attention to more qualitative internationalization, so more focus on the quality, not necessarily the output, like how many students are traveling, but actually the outcomes, and more importantly, the impact that internationalization can have. And this impact doesn't come only from mobility, the incoming and outgoing students. So not just because of the pandemic, but the pandemic has accelerated some things that had already been set in motion. Internationalization at home, so I represent the expert community internationalization at home of the EAIE, and that expert community has been growing expansively. Every year at the conference, more and more people join our sessions because there's a need to include more people in internationalization, which is what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, not just exclusively in Europe, but it is a very interesting change in narrative. So we're seeing a surge in internationalization, or more importantly, maybe we see an increased awareness of that which was already done when it comes to internationalization of the curriculum or internationalization at home. And by seen, I also mean seen by leadership, because very often the university's narratives, and certainly also in my university, the narrative, if you ask the dean or the head of the board of our university what they think of when they think internationalization, and they think the international classroom, which is still connected to mobility, so incoming, outgoing. This is a very persistent narrative. Even though the university has less than 10% mobility, the Netherlands is one of those European countries that scores very high on mobility, and by that we mean students that go abroad for a semester. The Netherlands scores around 20, and Germany is also a country with very high numbers, 30%, but my university, because it's applied sciences, which is slightly different, we have less than 10%. So I always ask the leadership, what about the 90%? Because there's a lot of students that also need an international, intercultural experience to prepare them for employability. So this is actually the interesting shift that we're seeing, where we're making stronger connection for what is the impact that we want to create, and why are we doing internationalization. So we're linking it to employability. So we're seeing a shift from focus on mobility to focus on internationalization at home, which also goes along with, or is aligned with, a more carbon neutral type of internationalization. So we're trying to promote travel, international travel within Europe, and preferably in a more carbon neutral manner. And anything that's outside of Europe, to do that virtually or digitally. So to when we connect with global partners, to do that in an online sphere, if you want. Let's see, we're also trying to connect the local and the global much more, so to focus much more on how do we connect with community, how service.
También podemos ver cómo conectar con la comunidad y ayudar a los alumnos y alumnas
in their internships, the job applications that they do. So some of the recommendations that we're looking at is to stimulate global learning. So not necessarily, we don't always talk about internationalization, but we also talk about global learning. Or in my institution, in the Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences, we talk about inclusive internationalization. And inclusive as in that all students should have access to it, but also that it includes all kinds of modalities. That could be internationalization of the curriculum, internationalization at home, the formal, the informal, and the hidden curriculum, but it also includes mobility. Of course, we have nothing against mobility, but we don't want to just cater to the cultural elite. So we're trying to include more internationalization of the curriculum for example, to include it or connect it to professional development. And actually my new role within the university it was sort of triggered maybe a little bit by the pandemic. So in a way, I am grateful for 2020 because it set some things in motion. I am now an educational advisor for internationalization of the curriculum and COIL virtual exchange. This is a position that didn't exist before. So the fact that it was created indicates that there's a need, it's a recognized need, and my role is connected to teaching and learning. So there's also this alignment that internationalization of the curriculum needs to be paired by professional development to help academics, who are at the core, of course, of internationalization of the curriculum, to help academics develop this, to help them shift also this paradigm in how we teach and how we engage with our students. And we do that, for example, by integrating the sustainable development goals, because this is very high on universities' agendas. How do we incorporate or connect the sustainable development goals to our curriculum and to our university's vision? And we can do that through, for example, international projects such as COIL. One of the projects I'm very proud of that we're working on right now, 5 European universities, Amsterdam being one of them, with 5 South African universities. It's called ICUDU. So it's an Erasmus plus capacity building project. And instead of internationalization, interestingly enough, we don't call it internationalization of the curriculum, we call it transforming curriculum through COIL virtual exchange. And we're hoping that will bring more also COIL collaborations within Africa, not just South Africa, but within Africa. I'll leave it at that, Nicholas. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Eva.
Thank you so much, Eva, for your participation. Some key elements of your intervention, I think, were quite interesting with regards to the transversality of internationalization and the inclusiveness of internationalization as key elements at a strategic level, especially what you were mentioning, the international or global learning, I think that's how you called it, starting to think that internationalization can be an opportunity for learning. So it's about finding mechanisms to foster those learning processes, and that is fundamental. I think it's very positive to know that in Europe, or at least in your university, these opportunities are being designed globally, or at least internationally, at an inter-university level, and that this can lead to structure for learning, because that's what it really is about, with an inter-regional approach. The next block will be about the tools. So Eva has already mentioned some things, but that's what we're going to be discussing in the next 45 minutes. Now, it is my turn to give the floor to Nicolas Juste. Nicolas is representing Southern Africa, and I also asked him to put Africa in context. Africa is large, diverse, and has not only a complexity of its own at a continental level, it also has it at a sub-regional level. There are sub-regions with 4 languages spoken apart from the originary languages. In South Africa, for example, Afrikaans, English, and Zulu coexist, which is quite complex. And I hope no offense here, but there's a certain complexity at a continent level that sometimes is not understood outside of Africa. That's why we asked Nico to help us understand Africa's complexities and why internationalization and interregionality are an opportunity for Africa, inside of Africa and outside of Africa, and what challenges that poses. Nico, you have 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Nico, and good afternoon or good morning to all my good friends. I see some of those that I know well are also on the call. It's a privilege for me to be here, and I just want to say that when one presents a continent, it makes me feel very humble. I've always been someone that feel African. My ancestors arrived in 1657 in South Africa, so all we know is Africa, and I'm probably the only one that can speak that can pronounce Eva Haug properly, because Afrikaans and Dutch is very closely linked. But to come to the point, I initially wanted to use a slide, but I think slides sometimes confuse webinars, and I will just stick to talking about what Nico has asked me. And I will start off by highlighting just some of the challenges. And let me first start with what Nico ended off in asking me to do, and that's the complexity of the African continent. It's a continent. It's a large, and it's huge, and there are some of these map exercises that you could fit Europe and China and all of that into Africa. I think some of you have seen it. So it's definitely not a region. It is a continent, and it's diverse. Its regional history is very diverse. Sometimes North Africa, people wouldn't see it as part of Africa. Of course it is, but it is much more closely linked to the Middle Eastern bloc, and as a region, the MENA bloc actually operates, as far as higher education is concerned, much closer than the sub-Saharan African bloc. The sub-Saharan Africa is, you have the West and the East and the Southern Africa. And then, of course, you also have the Francophone African grouping within Africa. So it is complex. And therefore, I don't think one can actually talk about one strategy or one policy. It's differentiated. And I think one needs to look at it from that, and look at Africa from that point of view. I always, at NAFSA, when we had the special intergroup on Africa, my colleagues that joined me there would know that I always had to, and sometimes quite angrily, say that Africa is a continent, and if you think about problems in a particular part of Africa, you can't duplicate it and think it is the whole of Africa's problem. The only problem that is currently African is the pandemic, which is global. So with that, I want to also highlight some of the other challenges that we have. And the one is to actually, if you study internationalization and the theory of internationalization, you would find that within the African continent, there isn't a common understanding of what higher education internationalization is. And the reason why is the historical and colonial links that particular countries and regions had and still have with the original, with the colonial powers. Therefore, the Francophone countries and their institutional links with France in particular is totally different from, for instance, the Anglophone countries, link with the UK and so forth. But and therefore, in many cases, if you study the concept of internationalization, you wouldn't find many international offices in African universities. You find a linkage office. Now, I believe linkages still refer back to the old colonial practices. I'm not criticizing it. I'm not judging it. All I'm saying is there is still a diverse practice of internationalization. It is changing. Sarua, the organization that I also represent, we had a colloquium series, and one of the colloquia was around internationalization. And of the universities that presented papers, it's very clear that the modern trends in applying comprehensive internationalization, as Eva have explained, with John Hutzig have written a lot about comprehensive internationalization, and I believe that we need to look at it from that point, internationalization from that point of view, and it is being practiced on the continent, in the SADC area in particular. I know the SADC and the East African universities quite well, and from talking about a common understanding of internationalization, there is a growing understanding that internationalization is not only mobility, and colleagues, mobility in our African explanation is largely linked to people leaving Africa to study elsewhere, and sometimes returning and sometimes not. So if you look at the outward mobility, the majority of people that leave Africa go to study and then stay. There's a few countries that actually have turned the tide. But so when you look at mobility from the European or American point of view, you look at short-term mobility and so forth. Very few African students practice short-term mobility. The majority is actually students that leave either for undergraduate and postgraduate studies. And it forms part of the whole commodification also of higher education. And at the previous webinar, I was clear by saying, I have nothing against the commodification, and I've got nothing against recruitment of students to study elsewhere, but don't call it internationalization. I think we're confusing two concepts, and that is still part of the misunderstanding in the African situation. Another point problem that we have around internationalization is capacity to manage internationalization institutionally. We can't take it for granted that most universities in Africa have the capacity. It is an issue, and I hope that through some of the latest EU and other programs that's happening within Southern Africa and East Africa in particular, we can upscale the capacity to manage internationalization comprehensively. One of the big problems, of course, colleagues, is that if you just take SADC and SARUA, there's about 360 universities in the 16 SADC countries, the SADC countries. Of those, nearly 52% are private. And some of them are small, some are bigger. Most of them are private for profit. And of course, there's a lot of research being done on private for profit institutions and internationalization. Internationalization isn't high on their agenda because anybody who says internationalization doesn't cost money, no, it's not true. And therefore, the large number of private universities has an effect that a large number of students and academics, faculty for that matter, don't participate in international activities because of this reason. The question also is, institutional strategies, do they exist? Yes, they do. But if we analyze the institutional internationalization strategies, a lot of them are linked to national strategies. And therefore, the question can be asked, are they really realistic? I don't think so. We have studied that, we've done an assessment of international strategies in Southern Africa in particular, and how effective they are. And it is because of some of the autonomy issues, they have to be linked to the government strategies. And I will either now or later talk about government strategies and its influence on internationalization. I can, however, in some cases, there's real positive outcomes. The two countries that in Southern Africa, and in Africa for that matter, there's only two countries that have actually, as part of government strategy, based their economic development on the knowledge economy. Now, if you make the knowledge economy your driver or future driver, you need to make sure that your universities can provide you with the necessary intellectual and other capital to drive, to promote and grow your economy. And you can't do that without being globally connected and globally linked. And the governments of Mauritius and Botswana were the first to do that. And if you look at their institutions, they are slowly, their strategies are clearly speaking to the national strategy, but it is a relevant internationalization strategy. And then lastly, South Africa, during COVID, in November last year, they at last promulgated the higher education national policy for higher education internationalization, and that is built on the philosophy of comprehensive internationalization. It speaks about all the issues that Eva has spoken about on comprehensive internationalization. And then just to conclude on Africa, the whole notion of internationalization as a driver of regional collaboration is still at a very low level. Although SARUA is an inter-country organization, that means it's a network that connects. I don't think, and we've just done a little survey, that I don't think that countries actually see that as internationalization, while I do believe it is, because as Nico Patrici rightfully said, within the SADC countries, we've got the Portuguese-speaking Angola and Mozambique. We've got the French-speaking DRC, Seychelles, and partially Mauritius, and then the English-speaking rest. Just in that, if you want to talk about cultural differences and so forth, if we can enhance intra-regional collaboration mobility, it would already enhance internationalization. And then if you link that to some of the other networks that we bring about through Obriel and so forth, it is a ready-made recipe to actually see comprehensive internationalization happening much more strategically. But that's for now. Some of the other issues, Nico, we can discuss in the later discussion. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Nico.
Thank you so much, Nico, for your intervention. Yes, the idea of comprehensive internationalization, or Eva was saying that it's transversal, or Vidya was talking about transversality of the internationalization strategies as a shared element amongst the different regions. And yes, Africa seems to be a continent, as you say, full of challenges that appear in India and in the complex reality of South America and the Caribbean. And before moving on to that reality, as I know that Vidya has to leave and it's quite late in Putney where she lives, and every time we have a webinar, it's so complicated because it's too early in Mexico and Colombia and it's so late in India. So before giving the floor to Marcio, I'm so sorry, Marcio, but I would ask Vidya to know if she would like to make another comment, 3 minutes, about India or about what she heard, and then we can let her go in peace. So this is the time, Vidya.
So Nicholas, I think I would just say that I fully agree with what Nico and Eva mentioned about internationalization in their own perspective. But what I would like to make a suggestion to all my friends, academic friends here, is that we need to definitely develop more dialogues, and on the map that you had shown of your study 10 years ago, we need to see a lot of crisscross happening than just a one-way traffic that goes from the south to the north. And therefore, I think we all need to make that effort. And I think FAUBOY, SARUA, and Obrial, and India is coming up with a new network called Indian Network for Internationalization of Education. And it is soon to happen, though of course it's taking a little long time because of some bureaucratic issues. But nevertheless, when that happens, that is the time when we will actually connect the dots between the south, and north. We are also talking to some Asia Pacific networks. And just before this webinar, Nicholas, I was in another webinar on, the UNESCO World Higher Education Conference. And I'm in that group of inclusive higher education. And in that, we had, the Secretary General of the Asia Pacific Rim University Network. So there are such networks all around Asia, and I'm trying to connect with them. And if through the Global India chapter, we can connect the Far East, to the South and the North, then those are the kind of strong networks that we need to develop. Because through these networks, I always believe that like through people coming together and developing a friendship, if networks start collaborating and developing friendships, best practices of universities can be shared. Just to give an example of what we learned in one of our last meetings of Obrial Global, where they had connected FAUBAI with us and with Africa, we learned that there are a lot of things that we can actually pick up as best practices from universities in Brazil, which can be shared as best practices with Indian universities. What I liked is about some of these common things that they do, to have common resources being shared between universities in that region. And in India, we never even look at that. In India, the states function totally differently. And though the education is at the central level, but it is also a concurrent subject which is dealt by every state. And you know that India is such a large country that every state is almost like every European country. And we don't even have an intra-regional collaboration. Where do we have collaborations within universities within India? We don't see eye to eye with them. And therefore, I think like inter-regional, we also need to develop within the country or within the region some intra-regional collaborations like what Europe has. This will help develop mobility of students in the different states in India. But that hasn't happened because we need a lot of academic innovations to happen for all this. So when we talk about inter-regional collaborations, Eva, I think a lot of internationalization of curriculum also needs to happen, because unless there is academic level playing field created, students will not experience a facilitated mobility, and so will teachers not experience. And therefore, I think these are policy matters that we need to discuss. And I'm very hopeful that the OBRIAR Global India chapter is getting a lot of visibility in this region, and I'll certainly like to enhance that visibility. Thank you, Nico.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias, Vidia.
Thank you, Vidia, for your comments, for participating. Effectively, we also hope that this also we are talking about Internationalización Integral, that is the name in Spanish of comprehensive internationalization. So that's what we want to achieve. We want to have a more flexible and internationalized learning, and also we would like to improve the collaborations between South, North in the line of what Eva and Nicolas were saying, in order to improve the conditions and the policies of the regions. Thank you, Vidia, for being here today. Now I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Marcio Barbosa. He is with us. Marcio is the new president of FAUBAI. Marcio, congratulations. Brazil has been in Latin America a beacon in terms of education. FAUBAI is the organization of internationalization, the oldest in Latin America. Probably is the one that has more international visibility, but it's not the only association in Latin America. In Brazil, in Latin America is a complex reality, even for Latin America. It's a huge country. They speak Portuguese and they don't speak Spanish, and they have their own strategy in the area of internationalization. When we talk about comprehensive internationalization, Marcio, I would like for you to tell us about the complex realities when you articulate the agenda within the Brazilian institutions. And also, we would like to know how this new network we think that this is a healthy relationship. We have friends of Falvai or friend associations in Falvai. We have the Colombian association that is the first one, or the first friend of Falvai, and then we have Fiesa in Chile, and also some associations in Argentina, and GLAD gathers all them, and Falvai is a priority association because of being the oldest, probably. So this comprehensive internationalization has to do also with common interregional strategies. I know that you could share good best practices in this regard. Marcio, you have the floor. Thank you, Nicolas. It's a pleasure to be here. I will speak in Portuguese to show you this strange language in Latin America. In the case of Brazil, the process of internationalization of universities occur in different or isolated universities. Some universities decided to work together with other institutions and with foreign governments. And in terms of initiatives, probably the first program that we have and is still in force is the student program that was created 50 years ago. And the program has a goal related to the 2030 agenda that is not leaving anyone beyond. And so it also includes Caribbean and African universities, and they are partners in these initiatives, and they send us hundreds of students to conduct different research studies in our universities. For many of our universities, this was their first internationalization experience, and also at-home internationalization. We have students from abroad that also helps us reflect upon the relationships with other peoples through knowledge. Falvai is a younger organization. It was founded in 1988, first as a forum of university advisors, and later it was established as an association. And it's the oldest association in Latin America that deals with internationalization of higher education. It has over 200 members, and therefore is the biggest in Latin America. It gathers institutions of different sorts and natures. Within the education system in Brazil, we have colleges, we have university centers, we have private, community, public institutions. And this diverse and inclusive space allows us to have more comprehensive discussions. It's kind of a third way to address challenges or hostile situations and to promote internationalization of the Brazilian curricula. And Falvai also contributes to internationalization through its member associations, and its main goal is to promote Brazilian education abroad through its associations, through different events in Brazil. We also focus in our annual conferences every April, and we also have the participation of Brazilian institutions in international education events, locally and abroad. And this promotes opportunities of international cooperation with other higher education institutions in Brazil. And we try also to participate in those initiatives that allow for the integration of actors of internationalization around the world. Our oldest experience 20 years ago is the network of international education associations. And it gathers 15 international education associations And in 2020, they prepare a statement for national governments that reaffirms the importance of internationalization of higher education to have a more sustainable future and a better future for everybody. And these also, the statement address international cooperation as a way to find solutions to global issues, especially in the context of the pandemic now. I invite you all to read this statement, to spread the word. It is in Portuguese, Spanish, and English. You can see it on the website of FAULAI. And also in May 2020, six networks of 6 Latin American countries proposed the creation of a Latin American network for the internationalization of education. NELAC is the acronym, and it was presented in 2020 during its conference for the internationalization of higher education. This initiative that includes FABI and also the Chilean network, LAMPE, that is also the Mexican Association of Internationalization, the FIESA, the International Association of Higher Education of Argentina. We have also the Network of International Cooperation of Argentina. We have also the Peruvian Network of Internationalization of Higher Education. So all these networks want to contribute to consolidate education in Latin America in order to strengthen collaboration between institutions of higher education in Latin America. And this has been a permanent effort with many challenges because of the health crisis that we have at a global level. And therefore, the cooperation and the actions that gather the different countries include over or almost 600 universities in Latin America. Latin America has a lot of advantages, natural, cultural, etc. And we need to highlight this region at a global level. The region can offer a lot to the world. And this is an initiative to promote internationalization of higher education in the 6 countries that promote the initiative, and it's aimed at creating synergies with other initiatives and networks in Latin America and around the world in order to address what Vidya was saying regarding Asian relationships. This action of cooperation is aimed at improving the relationships and the ties between the institutions in the region. So in practical terms, we have already some projects that are ongoing. We are also trying to see different actions and proposals, and each of the member countries of the network are leading different work projects. In the case of Brazil, we are working to implement a COIL in Latin America. And we would like to resume or to continue working with this experience that started 40 years ago. And we would like to expand it to the rest of Latin America. And we would like also to expand our relationship with other institutions. Chile already launched on Wednesday an exchange program with virtual mobility or online mobility, and Peru is preparing some projects in research. Argentina is working in the search for sources and the creation of partnerships to promote institutions in Latin America. And also we are trying to promote the exchange of best practices in Latin America and in the international sector, while Mexico is working also on identifying public policies that promote the internationalization of the higher education system of Latin America. So we have this network that is a network of networks. And the goal is to try to save efforts or not to duplicate efforts, because that is the way to work together with other countries in order to strengthen internationalization at the regional level first. And as a region, we can become stronger when we collaborate with the rest of the world. We promote online webinars and events open to everybody. And they have a focus on collaboration in the current context. Those webinars also try to promote internationalization policies that benefit as many students as possible. We try to conduct these events to share experiences within the academic community. There are also challenges because of the current emergency situation, and we are also trying to contribute to position Latin America as a space of quality in higher education. This network, we are not only participants, and together with Obrial and FAVAI is ready to work with, and all its members are ready to work in order to promote the strengthening of institutions, because probably that could be a good way forward. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marcio, for presenting FAVAI and to present those regional and interregional networks that you are creating. I would like Nicolas Juste and Eva to turn on their cameras for the second part of the webinar. It looks like that there are two elements. We have the strategic element on one side, that this element has to do with implementing comprehensive strategies of internationalization. And all the panelists show that there is a relationship between internationalization processes and regional integration processes. Or Eva was talking about the importance, the relationship of the different institutions in Europe, for example. But all of you also talked about the need that, thank you to the pandemic, to have concrete actions that can only be conducted by institutions. So we have now these opportunities. So we need to see how the implementation of internationalization at an institutional level has an impact at the regional level. So the question that I have to ask you regarding what you have said, Eva, I will start with you first. I would like to know about some experiences and some examples or specific examples about concrete actions that institutions can conduct or are conducting to address or to cover those opportunities in order to create cooperation or to make learning flexible, especially with those non-traditional actors or stakeholders. For Europe, it's easy to collaborate with Germany or France, but probably Peru has not the same opportunities, or Bolivia is not able to cooperate with Asia or Africa. To give you some context, because yesterday and 5 days ago, on the 4th and on the 9th of this month, together with a University of Mexico and with the Mexican Association of Universities, we organized some training sessions on going for South American universities. One of the challenges that South American universities had has to do with building, capacity building, and not only institutional strategies to implement digitally learning experiences. For example, the creation of positions within universities that belong to COIL or that belong or that promote internationalization at home. because we are lacking professional capacity and the creation of this institutional ethos regarding the need to internationalize curricula. This is not about having literature in other language. It goes beyond. It's not for a colleague to give a class from the Netherlands on the screen. It is much more. So please give 2 examples that would help higher education institutions to create a spaces of internationalization of learning with partners that are not traditional, that are not so at hand, but they could add some additional value. And you can work with an experience of Amsterdam or any other university in Europe. Eva, you have 5 minutes.
Okay. So you had a tremendously long question, so I'll
Bueno, la
try
pregunta
to...
fue súper larga.
Sorry, I need to switch off the translation because I'm hearing my own translator. So I'll try to answer, but I can only answer maybe part of your question. I agree with you. We're seeing, so as we're moving towards other type or include more inclusive and comprehensive internationalization, definitely the next important step is professional development. And so speaking from my own personal experience, because I am a facilitator of professional development, I'm a trainer professional development within my university, within the EAIE. I worked with Learn Chile, for example, when they started to, when they did their whole COIL, internationalization of the curriculum, and COIL professional development track. So it's, what is very interesting is this when we're looking at professional development now, we are looking, first of all, to professionalize academics, people responsible, directly connected to curriculum, because if you are able to transform, to not just internationalize, but transform one academic, imagine the amount of students that they reach, because it's not just one group that they do a COIL project with, but they start to look at their curriculum differently, right, after having done a COIL project. So COIL for us is, in Amsterdam, in Europe, is a vehicle that is a very strong, has a very strong transformative effect and a ripple effect. Not just that one project, but also your curriculum that you teach with other students. An interesting development in the Netherlands, this is very, very recent, or it will start in September. The Ministry of Education, that has always promoted mobility as internationalization, as the biggest driver for internationalization, is starting a new grant money. So it's a time release. So universities and academics can apply for a time release funding subsidy to learn how to develop a COIL project, a virtual exchange project. And they have to, first of all, write a proposal based on the learning outcomes. So not about like partner or the technology, learning outcomes. So very student-centered, very curriculum-centered. And the grant money is for an academic and an educational advisor or a curriculum designer. So that means that not just are we offering professional development for the academics, but for that support staff within all kinds of universities within the Netherlands for now, that then can build their own internationalization practice. So we're seeing a slow shift involving other stakeholders. We did the same, so with the Learn Chile, when our approach, and I worked together with Florida International University and Stephanie Doscher in that professional development. What we did is we trained academics, but we had curriculum designers, international officers, other people shadowing us, and we did debriefing, we did coaching sessions with them, so that after our training was over, they could continue the work. That's how you build capacity in different universities. So I think those are very interesting initiatives that we're seeing, and we're doing that also with our strategic partner networks within our Amsterdam University, for example. So we have a partnership with 8 European universities. This was very much research-based. 2 or 3 people in every institution was actively involved. And of course, the deans were involved. Now that we're involving COIL, we're developing COIL projects. We're going to develop a project about diversity in the European context to prepare these European citizens to be better, to be more capable, to have an intercultural dialogue together and to discuss what does it mean to be a European and what does that mean for me in my professional role. So yeah, I think it's an interesting shift. It's also very challenging because I think now as we have to hit the ground running in a way, because there's a huge need for people with a different skill set, and there's not that many people yet that feel confident enough to raise their hand and say, yes, I can. But I hope that a lot of people will join us.
Muchas gracias, Eva.
Thank you so much, Eva. And yes, it's a multidimensional question, of course. And it's great to know that you have been working in Latin America. Now I would like to move on to South Africa and ask Nico about the challenges of internationalization in the internationalization of the curriculum. This concept is a complex concept because it evidently calls for a particular institutional approach, but it's a concept or a practice that offers an opportunity to improve some of the problems you were mentioning, Nicolas, about the realities in South Africa and Africa as a whole. And it's also a good opportunity to work with non-traditional regions. How you see it, there's a concrete example in South Africa, something we could mention. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you. Let me start off with an example, and then I'll just elaborate around that to also highlight some of the challenges and opportunities. Sarua, 3-4 years ago, were granted some money through the UK to develop a climate change master's program in climate change within the Sarua network. That means it was a master's program that was developed by a number of Southern African universities, and each university could actually take the program that was developed and teach it in its own space. Therefore, it had to go through its own national accreditation processes, but it was a jointly developed master's program in climate change. The second phase of this project would start in 2 weeks' time, and I invite all of you. We're going to have a webinar on the climate change project, and the iteration of this is to develop joint short programs within the SADC region to be taught in the upskilling and reskilling of people working within climate change. So as an example, this is an excellent example where professors from in the region got together. I wasn't involved in the initial project. I'll be involved in the second project, and this is my invitation to all. We had a meeting yesterday, and I was saying to them, the biggest flaw in the project is that we are collaborating within the region, but we do not bring in experts from outside the region into the project. And I would appeal to my colleagues from Brazil and from South America, but of course the Europeans too. We know the best, the centers of excellence on environmental studying climate change in Europe and in the US. But, you know, as Nico said earlier, South-South links doesn't really exist, and we don't know each other that well. Therefore, Marcio, anybody from South America who would like to join the debate on climate change and within our region, you're more than welcome to join us. And if you go onto the Sarwa website, you'll find all the details. Now, just to come back to another example, Nico, in 1997, the SADC countries signed the education protocol that bound all countries in the SADC, all 16 countries in SADC. The protocol have a specific higher education section, and in that, it clearly speaks about recognition of courses, quality assurance, etc. We have made some progress. I have just done a 20-year evaluation of the protocol, and it will be published soon. There's still some flaws in it, but it is a very good base for intra-regional collaboration, which guides and which steers the collaboration within the region. And I'm sure if other regions have similar documents, it could actually speak to each other. Nico, you know about the Aqua project, which tries to get a continent-wide quality assurance. I don't believe it will work unless it's regionally, Africa regionally, there's a foundation within that. Just lastly, to talk about practices, Eva knows, I'm also a research associate of the University of the Free State, who is the South African coordinator of ICUDU. And I've been, Eva, I think we've seen each other on a Friday afternoon coffee, digital coffee. But I've made the point, and I want to make it again. We are all moving into a new environment of teaching and learning. But we haven't given it enough theoretical foundation. If we really want to develop COIL, or I like to move more to digital teaching and learning, I think we need to challenge our curricular experts and our subject experts to really start thinking new on how to develop curricula properly. If you were talking about intercultural competencies, how do we really develop intercultural competencies through digital mobility? Because we've got all the practice on when people physically move. And I want to refer to my mentor, the late Joe Mestenhauser. Mestenhauser always said it is all about theory and philosophy. And I think we mustn't jump now into just doing, looking at the practical implementation of new modes of delivery without giving attention to the theoretical. And Nico, that's to me the beauty of this space that we are now in. I really think that South-South-North collaboration in developing new theories around teaching and learning and digital mobility should be founded in this space, so that we, and now I'm sorry if I to talk about the we as the South, that we are not always following the North, but that the theory and the practice that we're developing should be jointly, so that we are co-owners of the new knowledge and not just users of the new knowledge. So Nico, I know that was not what you asked me the last bit to say, but around the practical, one of the things that I really would like all of you to be part of is this new project. It's a 2-year project. It is an intra-ACP, the last intra-ACP funded project. You all know that the Europeans are not funding it anymore, but that's the last one. And I think we want to use that also as a vehicle, not only to deliver what the project says, but also to look at the theory and the practice around digital mobility in climate change, as an example. Thank you, Nico.
Thank you very much, Nico. Let me turn this into Spanish. Gracias otra vez.
Thanks again. two comments before giving the floor to Marcio. First, we have a question to Nico Juste about the website and the name of the project you were talking about. It's a question from Argentina. Could you reply, Nico, on the questions and answers section to Miriam Carvalho?
Sure, I'll put it in the question and answers section, yes.
Eva me dice que
Eva is telling me that her cat is telling her that in 9 minutes she has to go. So Eva, thank you so much for being here, for your comments. We are sure that this will not be the last time we see each other. So Marcio, please try to use less than 9 minutes. What about the chance or the possibility of building this collective knowledge from the South in relation to the North? The first element, I think, is knowing each other. We always say that you cannot separate a continent without the content because they need each other. But the truth is that for the content to appear, sometimes you need to create it. For example, in the case of FAUBAI and Brazil, I know, and many people know, because they know about Europe, that the BRAVE program of FAUBAI is trying to generate capacities to share experiences, virtual experiences. And this is a Brazilian program, as Eva was telling us in Chile. Eva was also part of the FAUBAI program. So there are a lot of elements we're seeing here, and we hope that these activities will be consolidated so we can think of how to internationalize learning, how to generate mechanisms to flexibilize learning, to internationalize these programs in a transversal way. So Marcio, please, if you can tell us, apart from RAPE, what's your organization doing and what's the situation in South America, I would really appreciate it. Well, we had a first experience when Brazil was part of the BRICS, the group of Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa. We had some meetings to find some agreement in terms of cooperation with the universities, but of course, the situation in the world economy made these countries to become further away. So they remained as local experiences, even though there was some progress. The internationalization of the curriculum is a great difficulty in Brazil, but also in Latin America in general, because there are two main obstacles. First of all, the lack of foreign languages in institutions, and then programs that many a time are closed and not flexible. That second problem was addressed by the universities. Many of them are concerned after different internationalization experiences. They're concerned about the flexibility of the curriculum and their teaching. Sometimes we have too closed a curriculum that will not allow for the mobility of Brazilian and foreign students. And that mobility was very difficult, and it was very difficult to organize. The credits depending on the rigid structure of our curriculum. So that would be a very important step for internationalization. But it would also mean a bigger discussion between the stakeholders and a bigger transparency in the institutions. Because many a time people think that internationalization will lead to losing the regional features. But that's not true, because the internationalization of the curricula brings a solution. And I think that, to answer your question about South-South cooperation, I think that's what we're lacking right now. We have had a lot of experience in South-South-North cooperation with Latin American countries, which was the only collaboration we had. And we need more South-South cooperation because we need to learn more about the cultures that have similar problems and see the solutions they found for other problems. And we need to help institutions to transform life in those countries. Countries live or go through similar situations in the South and have the possibility to better understand the solutions and finding solutions that are not invasive, that are not just research, but actual solutions related to our lives, our problems. I hope I made a contribution.
Thank you. I have a problem because I listen in Portuguese and then I change the language, so that's why I take more time. We have only three of us are here because Eva and Vidia had to leave. But in order to close today's webinar, I would like to remind the participants that you can leave your questions on the question and answers box, and we will send those the panelists your questions. I think that we have answered all the questions that were asked on the Q&A and on the chat. We have a question from Geneva Ferro regarding the options available. The goal was to have an icebreaker, but not to give specific data or statistics. But in order to conclude today's webinar, I would like to say that the members of Obrera Global are organized in different chapters. We have the South American chapter, the Caribbean chapter, the African chapter, in the Indian chapter board. We have kind of a board that includes the different chapters. And in a recent meeting, we decided to work on 3 priority lines that were agreed upon by some of the most representative associations. I'm talking about ASCUN, SARUA, the African Association of Universities, and FICI in India, and the Indian Association of Universities. And we agreed upon 3 lines or priority lines of action. The first will be led by ASCUN and AUGM, that is open science. The second priority line will be led by College Cork in Ireland, that has to do with sustainability and education. And the third line of action is to launch some South-South and South-North dialogues regarding internationalization in learning. And one of the first events of that series will be coordinated by India and Brazil, so that they can reactivate the spirit of the BRIC countries that was lost, to put it in a simpler way. And following what Nicolas Juste was saying, we just want to promote the implementation of institutional policies that help rethink internationalization, thinking the internationalization of learning, the flexibility of curricula, the modularization of curricula, a tool to facilitate internationalization, and everything to think this from an interregional perspective, that is South-South-North. I think that this is a great opportunity. I think that Africa and South America, you share many of the challenges, and we have great opportunities to collaborate if we're able to overcome those barriers that you were talking about, Marcio. Everything that has to do with languages, the lack of knowledge regarding the institutional context of each of the associations and universities. In Obrial Global, we would like to promote these global dialogues. We could do this, but I think that we need to take into consideration the context. And sometimes we are just looking at the context from our own perspective, but that's not enough. So these lines of actions that we have presented today, and I would like to thank you, Falvai, and also Symbiosis and Sarua for cooperating with this international dialogue. We hope that this helps us to promote.
No sé si Nico o Marcio quieren decir.
I don't know if Marcio or René would like to add something, otherwise we're just closing today's webinar. Nico, Marcio, René, I just want to thank for this invitation, for presenting this discussion. And Brazil, I would like to say that it's a pleasure to meet you all, René, Nicolás, Eva, and we would like to work together with Obrial, and we would like to participate in these events. It's important to improve this South-South cooperation to us. We are here to collaborate through our institutions and universities. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marcio. I know that Nico Schultz is answering some questions regarding decolonization and internationalization posted by some of our colleagues. Nico, would you like to close? And I also want to thank your participation. You have the floor.
I thank you, Nico, for inviting me. It is always a pleasure to be part of this group, and there's never enough time. So I did to take the whole debate on decolonization, internationalization further. That'll take us another 5 webinars, but you are more than welcome to email me, and we can actually connect it to the colleague who've asked the question. But it's a real privilege to be part of this, and I just want to say to my South American friends, I really enjoy engaging with you. And I hope that we can actually build a much stronger connection to really deep think internationalization and the future of internationalization. You know, we always talk about BC, before COVID. I think we now need to start thinking about after COVID. How would it involve, how would it change our lives and what we were doing? So, Nico, again, just thank you for inviting me and having me on this program. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a Marcio. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Marcio. Thank you, Nicolás. Thank you all those who follow the webinar. And I also want to publicly thank those institutions that sponsor, especially the presidents of these chapters of our AUGM, ASCUN, that is and their executive director, Oscar Dominguez, since they all supported from their institutions the work of the South American chapter. Last news or recent news, we are following the trends, and we have the Lab for the Internationalization of Education, INER, of the University of Mar del Plata. They prepare a study, and it will be published soon. It will be on the website of Obrial. So we are going to present it together with Alvai and other members, and we will be working together and communicating with you to improve the collaboration soon. Thank you and take care.